What's going on, Orange Nation? This is Neil Adler with another episode of Syracuse Central on the Fan Arch Network. It is Monday. Who's pumped about Monday? I'm pumped, sort of. Not really. The weekend's more fun. What'd you all get into this weekend? Have any fun? I've been chilling with my son in Nashville, so got no complaints there. By the way, this is Syracuse Central. We talk about Syracuse football, basketball, and recruiting. And if you are so inclined, hit that subscribe button and drop me comments as always and tell me what you like and especially what you don't like. So hope everyone had a great weekend. We're gonna start the show with something that really doesn't have much to do with Syracuse football, but honestly, I feel like talking about it. So yesterday, the college football playoff 12-team field was announced, and there was some drama, controversy, whatever you want to call it. There always is going to be some. Um, but it was just interesting because if you were obviously, watching championship games this weekend, so Duke beat Virginia in the ACC title game in Charlotte, so that knocked Virginia out of contention, and that to me, I figured likely meant that the ACC wasn't going to get a team in because Duke was the ACC's conference champion, but they had five losses. They're 8-5. And there was a lot of scuttlebutt about Miami. They didn't get into the title game, but they were 10-2. And with Alabama losing to Georgia, there was a lot of talk leading up to the selection show that Miami, Notre Dame, and Alabama were in contention for the final three at-large spots because the five highest ranked conference champions get in, and with Duke being the ACC champion, they weren't likely to be ranked higher than multiple Group of Five teams. So in the end, Duke didn't get in, which obviously I get that. Miami did get in. Alabama got in. Notre Dame did not. Shout out to Indiana, number one overall seed, undefeated. Tremendous. Kirk Cignetti, what a good coach. Um, and obviously, it would have. I was preparing to do this show or this segment for Syracuse Central, suggesting that it was embarrassing that the ACC didn't get a team in, but they do. But it's not their ACC champ. It's just weird. I don't know. I'm starting to feel like, and I know it's a business and it's a big business, and they might expand it further, but I feel like at some point, and I don't want to compare it to the March Madness, the men's and women's basketball tournaments, because those are much bigger fields. But should they just like have it in the CFP, if it's staying at 12 teams, should they just have the 12 highest ranked teams get in? Because like, so JMU and Tulane got in as two of the five automatic bids, conference champions, along with Indiana in the Big Ten, Texas Tech in the Big 12, and Georgia in the SEC. Like, I have nothing but respect for JMU and Tulane, and I have multiple family members that went to JMU, and it's a beautiful campus. But like, are you really telling me that JMU and Tulane are better than Notre Dame or other couple other teams that probably just barely missed the cut from an at-large perspective? Notre Dame, obviously, BYU, and then probably you throw in like Vanderbilt and Texas. Are you really telling me that JMU and Tulane are better than any of those teams I just mentioned? And this isn't me crapping on Group of Five and mid majors and all that, but I'm just being honest. Like, and the committee, the CFP selection committee chair, I think he is the chair. I was watching yesterday on Sunday with my son, and he was on ESPN, talking to Reese Davis, and he talked about how, because the weird part is that um, last week during the final set of rankings before the final rankings, so to speak, Notre Dame was ahead of Miami, and then obviously Miami jumped Notre Dame, but neither team played this weekend. That makes no sense. But so the committee chair said that um, with BYU losing big to Texas Tech, they fell back a handful of spots, and that pushed Miami up to be like neck and neck with Notre Dame, and that kind of triggered the committee looking at Notre Dame and Miami head to head, and maybe they weren't doing that in the past. And their strength of record, their strength of schedule, all the metrics were like basically identical. And I think the final determinant was that Miami in the season opener beat Notre Dame, and I know that was by 3 points, and it was the season opener months ago. But you can't ignore head to head. For me, couple things. Like, even if Miami and Notre Dame weren't like right next to each other in the rankings prior to Sunday, you can still like compare them, so to speak. And also, like, this is it just from an optics standpoint, like, and I'm not saying Notre Dame should have gotten over Miami. I really could care less. I don't want to hear people whining about Notre Dame because they lost their first two games, albeit to Miami and Texas A&M, two teams in the field, and then they won their next 10 in a row. But who did they beat? They beat Pittsburgh, they beat USC, they obviously they smashed Syracuse. But like whatever, they had their chances. It's just like the optics are Notre Dame is ahead of Miami last week. Neither of them play, and then Miami jumps Notre Dame to get into the field. It makes no sense. Even though I just laid out the kind of the rationale. And again, no disrespect to Tulane and JMU, but just I don't know, man. Just put the 12 best teams. But then the problem becomes like the SEC is so loaded, they're gonna get, are the just put the 12 best teams in. I'm sorry. And is Notre Dame one of the 12 best teams? Probably. Is Vanderbilt and or Texas better than Tulane and James Madison? Of course. But James Madison and Tulane can only control what conference they're in and who the teams they play and how they do. And they both were really good. So it's an imperfect system. And the bottom line is, again, if this segment bored you because it has nothing to do with Syracuse, it's the ACC and it's just a larger thing. And hopefully Syracuse will be in contention for the CFP in the future. But congrats to all the teams that made the field. And look, I'm not crapping on Miami. I root for ACC teams when they're not playing Syracuse, just like I used to root for Big East teams. And if that makes me a weirdo, then you can call me a weirdo in this in the comment section. But all right, so we're gonna move on here to some portal stuff. So a couple things to keep in mind. The transfer portal for Division One, which is FBS and FCS players, does not officially open until January 2nd, and it's open from January 2nd till January 16th. The transfer portal for Division Two players is like, as far as I can tell, is always open. There's no specific window. They just obviously have to give notification, all that, and you presumably a lot of Division Two guys that want to enter the portal will do it after their season's over. And then JUCO, I don't think there's a transfer portal at all. So anyway, so this segment talks a little bit about a couple of guys, and one is Malachi James, and he's a sophomore running back slash return guy for Syracuse, and he announced on X on Sunday that he will enter the portal on January 2nd. He didn't say he was entering today or Sunday because he can't. And so he's like an ultra fast dude. Like he barely played this year because of injury, and I just want to wish him well. I just want to wish him well. Um, let me just, I thought it was a little interesting, and I'm not trying to dig up anything, but in his note, I'm looking at it on X right now. Unless I'm unless I'm missing it, it looks like he didn't mention, he thanked obviously, Syracuse and Orange Nation and all that, like the fan base, but I don't think he mentioned Coach Brown. To my coaches and the sports staff, Coach Nixon, Coach Thomas, Coach Red, Coach Brumfeld, Coach Johnson, Coach Coley, Maddox, Coach Emark, others, like I'm not saying anything into it. I'm not reading anything into it. I'm just reporting facts. But again, he barely played this year. He played in like I think 6 games last year, mainly as a return guy. I think he got a couple of carries, but he only played in 2 games this year. He's also, a track and field guy, just really fast. Seems like a great young man. And my point here is, I'm just letting you know that he was in the portal, or that he plans to be in the portal. And I just wish him well. We're going to see more of this. It's Malachi is not going to be the first dude that's going to enter the portal. You're going to see guys enter the portal. You're going to see guys Syracuse get guys out of the portal, and we'll just see how it all goes there. And so, but speaking of that, news came out. I think it was on. It was a couple. It was on. I think it was on Friday. But obviously, we haven't had a show since Friday morning. And I just wanted to pass this along in case you hadn't seen it. It's a Division Two guy. His name is Marcus Stokes. He's a redshirt sophomore quarterback at West Florida, and according to Pete Nakos at On3, who's very plugged in with transfer portal stuff, among other things, Syracuse is one of the schools that's made contact with him. Again, he's Division Two, So like there's not a specific portal, but his season did end in late November. They were in the NCAA Division two Super Region two semifinals. They lost. They were 10-2 overall. I wrote about it on Inside the Loud House when on Friday or I think Saturday. But when I wrote that article, and I guess I could just check right now just to make sure I'm being accurate here. So he was listed as the number one number one quarterback in the portal. Now, again, something to keep in mind. Let me just pull this up here. Yep, 3 stars, 20 overall, one at quarterback. Obviously keep in mind that the bevy of quarterbacks that are going to enter into the portal are at the FES and FCS level, Division One, and so they haven't entered in yet. So he won't be number one like forever, but it's something to monitor. And he was a one-time Florida commit, and again played at West Florida, and he was one of 8 finalists for this trophy for like the top Division two player. It's called the Harlan Hill Trophy. He had 30 touchdowns, 13 picks, almost 3,300 yards passing, 60.6% completion percentage, ran the ball for 367 yards, 10 scores. So, obviously a lot of production there. We'll see if anything comes of that. I guess the main takeaway is that, Fran Brown, it looks like they're going to have a vastly different quarterback room in 2026. Steve Angeli presumably will be healthy and will be the starter. Um, but Fran Brown has said that the quarterback room is he's eyeing having Angeli, 2 transfer quarterbacks out of the portal, and then Zaid Lott, who's a 2026 three-star, talented guy out of the Providence Day School in Charlotte. So what that means for Ricky Collins and Luke Carney and Filardi, although he's on scholarship for lacrosse, and then Bellin and Jakari Williams. I mean, I think a lot of those guys, if not all of them, are going to be gone. And if they are, we'll wish them well. But it's again, it's something to monitor. I'm not suggesting that Syracuse is going to make a huge run at this Marcus Stokes guy. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. I think it's a little too early to tell. Um, but certainly, as transfer portal news comes out, whether it's at the D2 level and then certainly in early January Division One, I'll be all over that stuff. So definitely tune into Syracuse Central for transfer portal intel and news. Okay, so on the Syracuse football staff, assistant staff coaching kind of carousel, so to speak, we've talked about some of the guys that will not be retained, and all that, and Elijah Robinson got demoted. So something could have been official by the time this ran because there's a little gap, but it looks like Elijah Robinson, who was the defensive coordinator at Syracuse the last 2 seasons and was going to be the defensive line coach and co-defensive coordinator, but not have play calling duties. LSU and their new head coach, Lane Kiffin, who was at Ole Miss and has been at other schools, they're looking to hire Elijah Robinson as their defensive line coach. And again, it wasn't official when I was taping this, so if it's official, it's official. If not, it's not. But just something to monitor. But a couple other things. Syracuse, I think, really over the weekend hit a home run. They hired Vince Kehres. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing his name. It's Kehres. I'm just gonna call him Coach Vince, as their new defensive coordinator. And this dude can coach. It's a really, really great hire. He was the defensive coordinator at Toledo for the past. Well, he was at Toledo the last 6 seasons, but he was most recently the DC there. And Toledo was one of the top defensive teams in the country this year. I'm just looking at a Syracuse Athletics press release. Toledo Rockets near the top of the country in nearly every defensive category. Total defense second, passing efficiency defense second, scoring defense fourth, passing defense fifth. All these other categories. He was been a nominee for the top assistant coach this year. Just tremendous, 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 tremendous hire. Um, I couldn't be happier about this one. Before that, he was at Mount Union, um, and he won. Let me look at this. How many? 12 NCAA championships, including his time as a head coach, assistant, student assistant player. Mount Union won 12 NCAA championships. That's insane. That's insane. And he won 2 NCAA titles for Mount Union, which is division. I think it's a Division three school, if I'm not mistaken. Let me see. Let me look that up. But the dude can coach. He can coach. Um, yeah, Division 3, and he won a couple titles there when he was the head coach. He was his career record as a head coach. He's 95-6. And again, I'm not saying these schools are Power Four level schools, but whatever. Like he's got a great track record. And another guy that it looks like Syracuse. Again, when I taped this, I hadn't seen anything official from Syracuse athletics, but Pete Thamel and others have reported. Pete is by the way, is an ESPN senior writer and Syracuse alum, and gets a lot of scoops. And so Syracuse was expected to hire, was finalizing a deal to make Juan Castillo the school's new offensive line coach. And he was an offensive analyst at Michigan, has worked at UCLA. He's worked for a ton of different NFL teams as an offensive line coach, including the Bills. Go Bills, my hometown, Baltimore Ravens, Eagles, Bears. He's got over 40 years of experience, between college and NFL. So again, on paper, I think these are two really tremendous hires for Syracuse, and obviously more are going to be coming up. More are going to be coming up. So we'll end up here with some viewer comments from my man here. Hold on, I love this guy. He's so cool. Peace, love, 5873. Um, So this was from a couple days ago, and it was before Calvin Russell had signed, and he did sign on Thursday night, later in the evening. It looks like he had a celebration party and all that. But Peace Left 5873 writes, for the last 2 decades, there was a vocal contingent of fan base that insisted that you can't recruit to Syracuse anymore because of the weather, facilities, location, city itself, and NIL money, the disparity in NIL money. Fran is proving those doubters wrong. Uh, with regard to Calvin, it sounds like he's torn between his relationship with Coach Fran Brown, maybe some other voice in his orbit. That was before Calvin did sign. So, and then MyMac777, another awesome viewer poster. I'll bet that LSU put the winter weather into the South Florida kid's head. His flip talk coincided with the winter storm we had in Syracuse. Now he's talking about where he wants to call his college experience home. Yeah, and again, so look, Calvin signed. He's the highest ranked commit signee for Syracuse football in more than 20 years, since like 2000, 2001. He's 5 stars according to 24/7 Sports. He's top like 60 or 70 according to both the composite rankings. The school he goes to, Miami Northwestern, is one win away from winning a second state title in Florida in a row. The Syracuse 26 class, which I talked about late last week on Syracuse Central, is in the low 30s. Let me just look it up right now just to make sure I got it right. It was like trending around number 30 overall. Let me just look it up on the 24/7 Sports Composite. Here we go. Number 30. And it's the highest ranked class for Syracuse in what I consider the modern area of when recruiting services started publishing really in-depth like scouting evaluations and rankings over the internet, like in an in-depth way. So there is a little bit of a gray area, but dating back, and I wrote an article on Inside the Lighthouse about this. I think on Friday. But if you're going back to like the early 2000s, like, and you go year by year, according to both the 24/7 Sports Composite and the Rivals Industry Ranking, which are both the composite services, this is their best ever. And I think Fran, his 3 classes, although obviously 2024 was not, completely his, but I think it's their 3 highest ever, or at least 2 of the 3 highest ever. And my point here, and Peace Love 5873 is completely on point. My Mac 777, great points as well. Look, and I went to Syracuse. Obviously, I've covered the team for a decade, but I went to Syracuse from '96 to 2000, graduated in 2000 from Newhouse. Yeah, I think it's kind of a tired narrative that like when whether it's fans or fans of other schools or analysts or who or other observers, they say, well, Syracuse isn't going to be able to recruit at a high level because of the weather and the snow there and whatever. That's BS. It's BS because Adrian Autry's gotten in a lot of multiple really highly ranked recruits the last 2+ years, whether it's Donnie Freeman, Sadiq White, Kyan Anthony, et cetera, and some good transfers. And they stunk last year. And he's really good at recruiting, and so is Brendan Strawn and Griff and all them. Um, and I'm not saying some recruits don't care about like the weather or being in a fancy city or like a glamorous city, like, but Fran is showing that you can recruit in Syracuse, and it's for me, yeah, NIL comes into play, rev share, all that stuff, but it's also just about winning on the field or on the court. And then, again, I think players like playing for Adrian Autry. They like playing for Fran Brown. They respect them. They both have really good recruiting chops, but definitely got to win on the court or on the field too. And I think Fran Brown gets a mulligan this year because this past season because of what happened to Angeli and other factors and whatever. But you look at 2026 with the guys coming back, the prep level class, which I just talked about, and then whatever they do in the portal, they're and hope presumably a more favorable schedule and an older roster, more veteran roster. They'll be back. They'll be back. And hopefully Syracuse basketball, they beat Tennessee last week and they're on the up and up. Yeah, I think Syracuse has good facilities. I think they have good head coaches. Again, if we're just talking about men's basketball and football, um, NIL, I think in football is fine. Basketball, I'm a little. I know they just played at the Players Era, which is an NIL-driven tournament out in Vegas, but I am a little concerned with Orange United closing down. Like, where is the NIL, third-party NIL, going to come from? And so, well, that's something I've been trying to kind of nail down a little bit more. But look, when I went to Syracuse, I never missed a day of class because of snow. It was definitely gloomy some, but it's actually I think Syracuse is a really pretty city, especially in the fall and in the spring. So recruiting is definitely on the up and up in both football and men's basketball. I'll leave it at that. I'll leave it at that. All right, that's going to do it for today's edition of Syracuse Central on the Fan Arch Network. I'm your host Neil Adler. Please subscribe if you are so inclined. Tell your friends. I really appreciate everyone's feedback and support. Have a great rest of your Monday, friends. I will talk to you again on Tuesday. Take care.